This ends tonight. He said it so quietly I almost didn't hear him over the hum of the old ceiling fan. For small words dropped into the darkness of our bedroom at 2:20 in the morning, like stones into still water. I felt the ripples reach me before I understood what they meant. I was sitting up against the headboard, phone screen lighting my face blue, when my wife's name flashed across it for the third time that hour. Saba, calling again. The first call had come at 1:47. I'd answered half asleep, voice thick. Gee, everything okay? Her voice was tight, controlled, the way it gets when she's trying very hard not to cry in front of someone. Zubair needs 22,000. Right now. Can you send it? I blinked in the dark, trying to make sense of the numbers. 22,000. 2 in the morning. Saba, it's late. What happened? I'll explain later. Just send it. Please. I sat up properly then. The sheet slid down to my waist. The room smelled faintly of the jasmine oil she puts in her hair, and of the faint burnt smell that always lingers when the voltage drops and the iron gets too hot. I don't have that much liquid right now, I told her honestly. The shop account is almost empty after the new stock, and my salary isn't until. Then take it from savings. She cut in. Not angry, just flat, like someone reading instructions. I rubbed my forehead. Saba, Beta, tell me what's going on. Is Zubair okay? Is he hurt? Long silence on her end. I could hear traffic in the background. A truck changing gears, a motorcycle revving too close. She wasn't home. He's fine, she said finally. Just, he needs it tonight, for something important. I can't explain right now. I looked across the bed at the empty space where my wife should have been. She had told me she was staying late at her sister's place because Baji wasn't feeling well. That was 8 hours ago. The second call came at 1:58. I didn't answer. I needed a moment to breathe, to think. The third call, the one that woke me fully, came with a message attached. Please don't make me beg, Ahmed. 22,000. Now. I stared at those words until the screen went dark. That was when I said it. This ends tonight. Not loud, not angry, just final. Like closing a door you've been holding open for years. I set the phone face down on the mattress. The fan kept turning above me. Slow, lazy circles, moving the same warm air around and around. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just sat there in the blue dark, listening to my own heartbeat and wondering how long I had been pretending not to notice the shape of the truth. We had been married 17 years. 17 monsoon seasons, 17 Eids, 17 winters where I wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders when she shivered watching morning TV. I thought that meant something. I thought time built a kind of armor around a marriage. Apparently not. I picked up the phone again, not to call her back, to open the banking app. The savings balance stared back at me. Indian rupee 187,420. Enough for emergencies. Enough for children's school fees. Enough for the new inverter we'd been promising each other since last summer. I stared at the number for a long time. Then I locked the screen. I wasn't going to send anything. Not tonight. Not ever again without knowing exactly why. I lay back down, eyes open, watching the fan blades blur into one gray circle. And somewhere in the quiet between 2 and 3 in the morning, something inside me finished breaking. Not with noise, with silence. The kind of silence that comes right before everything changes. The next morning came the way mornings always did in our house. Slow, familiar, almost gentle. The alarm on my phone buzzed at 5:45. I reached over, silenced it before it could wake the children. The bed still felt too big on her side. The pillow hadn't been touched since yesterday morning. I sat up, rubbed my face, and smelled the faint trace of her rose attar that always clung to the headboard. It made my chest tighten for a second before I pushed it away. Downstairs, the kitchen light was already on when I came down. Aisha was there, 16 and half asleep, stirring sugar into her tea with the same sleepy rhythm she'd had since she was 10. She looked up when I entered. Abba, you look terrible, she said plainly. I managed a small smile. Rough night. Where's your brother? Still sleeping. He has late classes today. She paused, spoon clinking against the steel cup. Amma didn't come home? I turned to the stove, filled the kettle, kept my back to her. She stayed at Baji's. Her sister wasn't well. Aisha didn't say anything for a moment. Then, she called me at midnight, said she might be late. I nodded without turning around. The water began to hiss softly. She asked if I needed anything, Aisha continued. I told her no. Then she asked about you. I poured the water over the tea leaves. Steam rose between us. What did you tell her? That you were asleep. A small pause. Was that the right thing? I carried the cups to the table and sat across from her. Yes, Beta. That was fine. We drank in silence. The clock on the wall ticked. Outside, the milkman's bell rang twice, sharp and familiar. Everything ordinary. Everything the same. Except it wasn't. Saba came home at 11:17 that morning. I was in the small drawing room, pretending to read the newspaper, when I heard the gate scrape open. Her footsteps, quick, light, the way she walked when she was tired but trying not to show it. The door opened. A rush of hot air followed her in, carrying the smell of sun-baked concrete and diesel from the main road. She looked at me. I looked at her. She was wearing the same sky-blue kurta she'd left in yesterday morning. Her dupatta was missing. Her eyes had shadows underneath them, not just from lack of sleep. "Assalamu alaikum," she said softly. "Wa alaikum assalam." She closed the door behind her. The latch clicked once. I folded the newspaper carefully, each crease loud in the quiet room. "You didn't send the money," she said, not accusing, just stating a fact. "No," I replied. "I didn't." She stood there for a moment, arms loose at her sides. Then she walked past me into the kitchen. I heard the tap run, glass filling, a long drink. When she came back, she sat on the sofa opposite me. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers laced together so tightly the knuckles turned pale. "Zubair was in trouble," she began. "Some boys. They lent him money for his bike. He couldn't pay on time. They came to the flat last night. They said if he didn't give 22,000 by morning, they would take the bike. And maybe more." I listened. The fan above us moved the same warm air. "Why didn't you tell me this on the phone?" I asked. "I didn't want to worry you." I let the silence answer for me. She looked down at her hands. "He's my son, Ahmed. My first son. I couldn't just watch them take everything from him. He's my son too." Her eyes lifted. Something flickered there, guilt maybe, or defiance. "I know," she said quietly. "But you always say we have to be careful with money. The shop isn't doing well. The children's fees are coming. I thought, if I handled it myself." "You thought you'd borrow from somewhere else? Or that I wouldn't notice 22,000 missing?" She flinched, just a little. "I was going to tell you," she whispered. "After." I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "Saba, where were you really last night?" She swallowed. The sound was loud in the room. "With him," she said. "At his flat. Waiting for the boys to come back." I felt the air leave my lungs slowly, like a tire going flat. Not shock. Not anymore. Just confirmation. "How long?" I asked. She didn't pretend not to understand. 7 months. 7 months. Long enough to become a habit. Long enough to learn each other's silences. I nodded once. The newspaper crackled under my fingers as I gripped it. "Did you love him?" I asked. I don't know why I asked. Maybe I needed to hear it. She looked at me for a long time. Her eyes filled, but no tears fell. "I don't know," she said finally. I felt seen. For the first time in years. The words landed soft. But they landed. I stood up. My knees felt old. "I need some air," I told her. She didn't stop me. I walked outside, past the gate, past the neighbor's bougainvillea spilling over the wall in violent pink. I walked until I reached the small empty plot at the end of the street, the one where children play cricket until the ball goes into someone's yard. I sat on the low boundary wall. The concrete was hot under my palms. A stray dog watched me from the shade of a neem tree, tongue lolling. I thought about 17 years. About the way she used to laugh at my bad jokes in the early days. About how she held Aisha for hours when she had colic, walking up and down the hallway until dawn. About how she cried the day we buried my mother, her face pressed into my shoulder so the children wouldn't see. I thought about how love doesn't disappear all at once. It erodes, slowly, like water wearing down stone. And when the stone is gone, there's just the empty space left behind. I sat there until the sun moved higher and the heat became unbearable. Then I walked back home. She was still on the sofa when I returned. She had changed into a fresh kurta. Her hair was wet from the shower. The days after that conversation stretched thin and brittle, like old newspaper left in the sun. Saba moved through the house carefully, not tiptoeing exactly, but with the kind of deliberate quiet people use when they're afraid one wrong sound will shatter everything. She cooked the same meals. Dal on Mondays, chicken on Fridays, aloo gosht when Omar asked. She folded laundry the same way, matching socks with that small satisfied nod she'd always done. But the air between us had changed, tasted different, drier, heavier, like breathing through cotton. I didn't sleep in our room anymore. The first night I took a blanket and pillow to the small spare room downstairs, the one we used to call the guest room, even though no guests ever came. The mattress was thin. The ceiling fan rattled more than it spun, but I slept better there. No jasmine scent. No empty space beside me. Just silence that didn't ask anything of me. Aisha noticed first. She was always the one who noticed the small shifts. The way a voice dropped half a tone. The way a door closed a second too softly. One evening she found me sitting on the back steps, staring at the washing line where Saba's dupattas hung like pale ghosts in the dusk light. "Abba," she said, sitting beside me without asking. Her knee touched mine. Warm. Solid. I waited. "Is Amma leaving?" I looked at the sky, the same bruised purple it turned every evening before the muezzin called Maghrib. "I don't know, Beta." She nodded slowly. "She's different. She looks at her phone like it's going to bite her. And she cries in the bathroom sometimes. I hear her." I felt something twist under my ribs. Not anger, just sorrow for the child who had to hear it. "She's trying to fix something," I said carefully. "Something she broke." Aisha leaned her head on my shoulder. The jasmine from her hair was faint, but it was hers, not Saba's. "Are you going to fix it too?" I exhaled. "I'm trying to fix me first." She didn't press. She just sat with me until the call to prayer rose over the rooftops, thin and silver in the cooling air. Omar was slower to see it. He was 21, busy with college and the part-time job at the mobile shop. He came home smelling of burnt solder and cheap energy drinks. But one Friday he walked in while Saba was setting the table and stopped in the doorway. He looked from her to me. Me standing at the counter slicing lemons for the raita, her placing plates with careful hands. He didn't say anything then, but later, when Saba went upstairs to change, he came into the kitchen. "Abba," he said quietly, "is it Zubair again?" I set the knife down. The blade gleamed under the tube light. "What do you mean?" He rubbed the back of his neck. The same gesture I make when I'm uncomfortable. "I heard her on the phone last week. She was talking to someone. Said his name. Said something about money and not telling Abba." I felt the floor shift under me. Just a little. "You didn't tell me. I thought maybe it was nothing. Maybe she was helping him with fees or something." He looked at me then, eyes dark and serious. "But it's not nothing, is it?" I shook my head once. He swallowed. "Is she with him? Like, together?" The question hung there, plain, brutal in its simplicity. "Yes," I said. The word tasted like rust. Omar's face didn't crumple. It just went very still. He stared at the floor for a long time. Then he said, "I always liked Zubair Bai. He taught me how to ride a bike without training wheels." I reached out and put my hand on his shoulder. Heavy. Warm. "I know." He looked up. "I don't hate him. I don't understand how someone can do that to you. To us." I didn't have an answer. Not one that would fit inside a kitchen at dusk. Instead I said, "People make choices. Sometimes the choices hurt more people than they help." He nodded slowly. Then he walked out to the courtyard, sat on the charpai, and stared at nothing until the streetlights came on. That night I heard Saba crying again. Not in the bathroom this time. In our old bedroom. Soft, muffled sounds that drifted down the stairs like smoke. I didn't go to her. I stayed in the spare room, listening to the fan rattle, counting the minutes until the pain felt smaller. The next clue came on a Tuesday. I was at the shop, the small hardware store my father left me, counting screws into plastic bags when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Ahmed Bai. A young man's voice. Nervous. Familiar. Zubair. A sharp intake of breath on the other end. I didn't think you'd pick up." I set the bag of screws down. The shop was quiet. Only the hum of the old fridge in the corner and the distant sound of a scooter passing. "What do you want?" I asked. Not angry, just tired. I wanted to say sorry. I closed my eyes for a second. "For what, exactly?" Another pause. Long. "For everything. For the money. For her. For coming between you two." I felt the words land, one after another. "She told you to call me?" "No. She doesn't know I'm calling. She ended it 2 weeks ago. Said she couldn't do it anymore." I opened my eyes. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. "Then why are you calling?" "Because I owe you the truth. And because I owe her an apology she won't accept." I didn't speak. He continued, voice lower now. "I loved her, Ahmed Bai. I really did. But I knew from the beginning it was wrong. I told myself it was just comfort. Just two lonely people. But it wasn't. It was selfish. And I'm sorry." I listened to him breathe on the other end, quick, uneven. "Do you want me to forgive you?" I asked quietly. "No. I don't deserve that. I just needed to say it. To someone who didn't hang up." I looked around the shop, at the shelves of nails and pipes, the calendar on the wall still showing last month's picture of a snow-capped mountain we'd never see. "Thank you for telling me," I said. Then I ended the call. I stood there for a long time, phone still in my hand. The shop smelled of metal and old wood. The same smell it had carried since I was a boy helping my father after school. And in that moment I realized something simple, something I'd been circling for weeks. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at her. Not at him. Just finished. The story had ended somewhere between the phone call at 2 a.m. and this quiet Tuesday afternoon. Now all that was left was to decide what came next. I didn't confront her that evening. Not the way people do in films, with raised voices and slammed doors and accusations flying like sparks. I simply waited. I waited through dinner. Saba cooked quietly, the same chicken karahi she always made on Thursdays, extra green chilies because Omar liked the burn. The kitchen smelled of garlic and cumin and the faint metallic tang of the old pressure cooker. She set the plates without looking at me for longer than necessary. Aisha talked about her biology test. Omar complained about a customer who wanted a cracked screen replaced for free. I nodded in the right places. I passed the raita. I asked Saba to pass the water jug. Our fingers brushed once, hers cool, mine steady. She pulled back as if I'd burned her. After the children cleared the table and went upstairs to their rooms, the house settled into its night rhythm. The hum of the fridge, the distant barking of street dogs, the slow drip of the kitchen tap I still hadn't fixed. Saba stood at the sink, rinsing plates under running water. Her back was to me, shoulders slightly hunched, the posture she took when she was carrying something too heavy to say out loud. I leaned against the doorway. The fluorescent tube flickered once, then steadied. "Saba," I said softly. She didn't turn. Her hands kept moving under the water. "Zubair called me today." The water stopped. Just like that. The tap dripped twice more before she reached up and turned it off completely. She dried her hands on the dish towel. Slow, deliberate wipes. Then turned to face me. Her face was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes right before the last wall crumbles. "What did he say?" she asked. "He said he was sorry. For the money. For you. For coming between us." She looked down at the floor, at the small crack in the tile near her left foot that had been there since the monsoon 2 years ago. "Did he tell you it's over?" I continued. "Yes. Did he tell you he loved you?" Her throat moved. She nodded once, small, almost invisible. I took one step into the kitchen. The light caught the side of her face, turning the shadows deeper. "How long were you planning to keep pretending?" I asked. She lifted her eyes then. They were wet, but no tears fell. "I wasn't pretending," she whispered. "I was trying to stop. Trying. Yes." Her voice cracked on the word. I tried to end it 3 times. Every time I told myself this would be the last call, the last message. Every time I failed. I felt something inside me shift. Not anger. Not yet. Just a deep, quiet exhaustion. "Why him, Saba?" She looked away, toward the window where the night pressed black against the glass. "Because he listened," she said. "Because when I talked about the shop being slow, about Aisha's exams, about how tired I felt all the time, he didn't say we'll manage or it'll get better. He just listened. And then he made me feel like I mattered. Not as a wife. Not as a mother. Just as me." The words hung between us. Heavy. Honest. I nodded slowly. "I stopped listening," I said. "It wasn't an excuse. It was the truth. I got comfortable. I thought being there was enough. I forgot that being there means seeing you. Really seeing." She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. Quick. Almost angry motion. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said. "I never wanted that. But you did. I know." Silence again. Longer this time. The drip from the tap started again. Slow, stubborn. I walked over to the counter, leaned against it, arms folded. "The 22,000, I said. "Was that the first time you asked me for money because of him?" She shook her head. "No. There were smaller amounts. 5,000 here, 8,000 there. I told you Zubair needed help with his mother's medicines. Or that he had to pay for his bike repair. You never asked questions. You just transferred." I closed my eyes for a second. The numbers added up in my head. Small cuts, nothing dramatic, nothing that would make me suspicious. Just enough to keep the lie breathing. "How much in total?" I asked. She swallowed. "Around 70,000. Over 6 months. 70,000. Not a fortune. But enough to buy groceries for 3 months. Enough to pay Omar's semester fees without touching savings." I opened my eyes. "Why didn't you tell me you needed help?" I asked quietly. "We could have figured it out. Together." Her laugh was small, bitter. "Because you would have said no. You always say we have to be careful. We have to save. We have to think of the children. And I understood that. I agreed with it. But that night, when those boys were at his door, when he was scared, I couldn't think about careful. I could only think about saving him." I looked at her, really looked, at the woman I had married at 23. The one who used to steal my fries when we went to the roadside stall after college. The one who held my hand so tightly during my father's funeral that my knuckles turned white. The one who gave birth to our daughter screaming my name. And the woman standing in front of me now. Tired, guilty, still beautiful in the harsh kitchen light. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," she said. "I'm not even asking you to stay. I just needed you to know the whole truth. No more secrets." I nodded once. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. Then I turned and walked out of the kitchen, up the stairs, past the children's doors, both closed, both with thin lines of light underneath, into the spare room. I closed the door. I sat on the edge of the thin mattress. I stared at my hands. They were the same hands that had held hers on our Nika day. The same hands that had carried Aisha home from the hospital wrapped in a pink blanket. The same hands that had signed every transfer without question. They didn't feel like strangers. They just felt older. And in the quiet of that small room, with the fan rattling overhead and the house breathing around me, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had been lost. Not just trust, not just money, but the simple, daily belief that the person sleeping beside you would never choose someone else's fear over yours. That belief was gone. And nothing, no apology, no promise, no tears, could bring it back. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay on the thin mattress in the spare room, eyes tracing the familiar spiderweb crack in the ceiling, listening to the house breathe around me. The soft creak of wood settling, the distant hum of a generator 2 streets away, the occasional motorcycle passing like a sigh. By the time Far Azan rose over the rooftops, thin and silver in the pre-dawn dark, I had made my decision. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, out of clarity, the kind that comes when the last illusion falls away and you're left holding only what is real. I got up before the rest of the house stirred, made tea the old way, loose leaves in the steel kettle, boiled twice, milk poured slowly until the color deepened to caramel. I carried 2 cups to the small table in the courtyard. One for me, one waiting. Saba came down at 6:40. She had changed into a simple cream kurta, hair still damp from wudu, dupatta draped loosely over her shoulders. She saw the second cup. She saw me sitting there. She understood. She sat without speaking. The steam rose between us in slow curls. I spoke first. Quiet. Steady. I've thought about this all night. I began. About what happens next. About what I can live with. And what I can't. She wrapped her hands around the cup but didn't drink. Her fingers trembled, just a little. I'm not going to throw you out, I continued. This is still your home. The children's home. But I can't pretend nothing happened. I can't go back to the way it was. She nodded once, small, almost imperceptible. I want a separation, I said. Not divorce. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But living apart. Under the same roof for now because of Aisha and Omar. Separate rooms. Separate lives. Separate money. Her eyes lifted. Money? Yes. I took a slow breath. I'm opening a separate account today. My salary will go there from now on. The shop profits, I'll keep half for household expenses. The other half is mine. No more joint decisions about savings. No more questions about where small amounts go. We both learned to stand on our own feet again. She stared at the tea. The surface had gone still. I deserve that, she whispered. You do, I agreed. And so do I. Silence stretched again, not heavy this time, just present. I'll tell the children, she said finally. Together. Together. I confirmed. No secrets. No half-truths. They're old enough to understand that love can change shape. That people can make mistakes and still be family. She swallowed. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Quiet ones, the kind that don't make noise. I never wanted them to see this side of me, she said. They already have, I told her gently. They've seen the crying, the late nights, the phone calls you answer in another room. They're not blind, Saba. They're just waiting for us to be honest. She wiped her face with the edge of her dupatta. I'm sorry, Ahmed, for all of it. I know. I stood up. The morning sun had begun to slant across the courtyard, warming the tiles under my feet. I'm going to the bank now, I said. When I come back, we'll talk to them. After lunch. Before Omar's shift. She nodded. Her voice was very small. Will you ever forgive me? I looked down at her, at the woman I had loved for half my life. I don't know, I answered honestly. But I don't hate you, and that's something. I walked inside, picked up my wallet and keys and left the house. The bank was quiet that early. Only 2 other customers, an old man depositing pension, a young woman withdrawing for college fees. The manager knew me. We'd gone to the same school years ago. He didn't ask questions when I requested the new account. Just processed the forms, took my signature, handed me the passbook with the fresh number embossed in gold. When I stepped back outside, the heat was building, the air thick with the smell of frying parathas from the stall across the street. I stood there for a moment, passbook in my hand, feeling the small weight of it. It wasn't freedom. Not exactly, but it was mine, untouched, unshared without permission. That afternoon we sat the children down in the drawing room. The same room where we used to watch cricket matches together, where Aisha took her first steps holding the sofa arm, where Omar once broke a lamp trying to juggle cricket balls. Saba and I sat side by side on the big sofa. Not touching, but close enough that the children could see we weren't enemies. I spoke first. "We need to tell you something important," I began, and then we told them everything. No softening, no blaming, just the truth, plain and quiet. Aisha cried. Omar went very still, jaw tight, but neither of them shouted. Neither of them ran from the room. When we finished, Aisha looked at her mother, then at me. "Are you getting divorced?" she asked. "Not right now," Saba answered softly. "We're trying to figure out how to live honestly. That might mean separate rooms for a while, separate money, but we're still your parents. We're still family." Omar spoke then, voice low, controlled. "I don't want to choose sides." "You don't have to," I told him. "We're not asking you to." He nodded once. Then he stood up, walked over, and hugged his mother, quick, fierce. Then he hugged me the same way. Aisha stayed seated, wiping her eyes, but she reached out and took both our hands, one in each of hers. And in that small gesture, something loosened inside me. Not completely, not yet, but enough that I could breathe again. That evening I moved my clothes to the spare room permanently. Saba helped, silently folding shirts, pairing socks, placing them in the small cupboard without comment. When we finished, she stood in the doorway. "Thank you," she said, "for not making this uglier than it already is." I looked at her. "You're welcome." She left quietly. I sat on the bed, surrounded by the smell of old wood and fresh cotton, and felt the first small breath of peace. It wasn't happiness. Not yet. But it was the beginning of something new, something built on truth instead of silence. And sometimes that's enough to start again. Word doesn't spread in our mahalla like wildfire. It spreads like damp in old walls. Slow, persistent, impossible to ignore once it starts. First, it was the small things people noticed. Saba no longer waited at the gate for me to come home from the shop. I stopped buying 2 plates of nahari on Fridays, only one. The children walked to tuition together instead of Saba dropping Aisha on her scooter. Little fractures, visible if you were looking. The first person to ask directly was my sister-in-law, Rubina, who lives 3 houses down. She came over one Sunday morning with a dish of sheer kurma she made extra. She set it on the kitchen counter, then leaned against the doorframe while I washed the breakfast plates. "Everything okay between you two?" she asked, voice casual, eyes sharp. I dried my hands on the towel. "Why do you ask?" She shrugged one shoulder. "Just, things look different. Saba seems quiet. You seem lighter somehow." I didn't lie. There was no point anymore. "We're separated," I told her. "Not divorced. Living separately in the same house for now. It's better this way." Rubina's brows lifted. She didn't gasp or clutch her dupatta. She just nodded slowly. "Zubair?" she asked quietly. I met her eyes. "Yes." She exhaled through her nose. Not surprised, just confirming something she'd already suspected. "People are talking," she said. "Not badly. Not yet. But they notice." I nodded. "Let them." She reached over and squeezed my forearm. Quick, sisterly. "You're doing the right thing, Ahmed. Quiet dignity is better than loud drama." After she left, the whispers grew legs. By evening, the neighbor auntie across the street asked Saba, while they were both hanging washing, if everything was all right at home. Saba answered simply, "We're figuring things out. No more, no less." The next day at the shop, old customers started asking careful questions wrapped in small talk. "Family well by? Children studying hard?" And once, from the electrician who always buys bulbs in bulk. "Heard you're handling things differently now. Good for you." I didn't confirm or deny. I just smiled and said, "Alhamdulillah." Zubair's name came up less than I expected. Most people didn't know the full story. Only that something had happened between Saba and that boy from the next mahalla. The ones who knew more, the cousins, the close aunties, chose silence over gossip. Not out of kindness exactly, out of respect for the quiet way we were handling it. Saba felt the weight most. She stopped going to the weekly ladies' Quran class for a month. When she finally went back, one of the older women, Amy from the corner house, took her hand at the end of the session and said, "Beta, mistakes don't erase the good you've done. Keep coming. We need your voice here." Saba told me that later, in the kitchen while we were making tea for the children. Her voice was soft, almost surprised. "They didn't turn away from me." I looked at her across the counter. "They never had to." She gave a small, trembling smile, the first real one in weeks. Omar and Aisha handled the outside world in their own ways. Omar grew quieter at the mobile shop, but the owner told me privately that he'd become more responsible. Staying late without being asked, double-checking receipts, never complaining. Aisha told her best friend the truth, and the friend told her mother, and somehow it circled back in a gentle way. A plate of homemade gulab jamun left on our doorstep with a note that said, "For strength. You're not alone." The biggest consequence came from the one place I hadn't expected. my own heart. One evening, about 2 months after we separated under the same roof, I was sitting on the courtyard charpai after Maghrib. The sky was the color of faded rose. The jasmine bush smelled strongest at that hour. Saba came out and sat on the other end, not close but not far. She pulled her dupatta over her knees like a blanket. "I told Zubair's mother," she said quietly. "Everything." I turned my head slightly. "She cried," Saba continued. "She said she was sorry for raising a son who could do this. She asked if she could come and apologize to you in person." I watched a moth flutter around the yellow courtyard bulb. "I told her no," Saba said. "That it wasn't necessary. That we were finding our way." I nodded slowly. "She's moving him to his uncle's place in Faisalabad next month," she added. "New start. Away from here." The words settled between us like dust after rain. "Do you miss him?" I asked. No accusation, just curiosity. Saba took a long breath. "Sometimes, but not the way I thought I would. I missed the feeling of being seen, not the person." She looked at me then, really looked. "I'm sorry I stopped seeing you," she whispered. I didn't answer right away. I let the jasmine scent fill the silence. "I'm sorry I stopped looking," I said finally. We sat there until the stars came out, small and sharp against the dark. No promises, no touching, just two people who had hurt each other deeply, sitting in the same small space, breathing the same air. And for the first time in a very long time, the silence felt like peace instead of punishment. Time doesn't heal wounds the way people say it does. It doesn't stitch them closed or make the scar disappear. What it does is teach you how to carry them. Lighter, quieter, without flinching every time something brushes against the place that used to hurt most. 6 months passed like that. Slow. Uneventful in the best possible way. I kept the hardware shop running the same way my father taught me. Open on time, close on time, never shortchange a customer. Always keep a small stool for the old men who like to sit and talk. The difference was I came home earlier now. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I wanted to be there when Aisha came back from college with stories about her professors. When Omar walked in smelling of solder and triumph because he'd fixed a phone no one else could. Saba and I lived in the same house, but in different orbits. She took the upstairs room, the one with the better fan and the window that caught the morning light. I stayed downstairs in the spare room that had become mine. We shared meals at the same table. We spoke about the children, about bills, about whose turn it was to buy milk. We didn't speak about the past unless it was necessary, and it rarely was. One evening in late autumn, the air turning cool enough that the jasmine gave way to the smell of wood smoke from neighboring houses, Saba knocked on the doorframe of my room. She stood there holding a cup of tea, the way she used to when we were first married, and she'd bring it to me while I read the newspaper. "I made extra," she said simply. I took it. Our fingers didn't touch, but the warmth of the cup traveled up my arm anyway. She lingered for a moment. "I've been thinking," she began. "I want to start working again. Part-time. There's a small tailoring shop near the market. The owner needs someone who can do embroidery. I used to be good at it before. Before the children. Before the years blurred together. Before everything." I nodded. "That sounds good. I won't ask you for money anymore," she continued. "Not even for household things. I want to stand on my own." I looked at her, really looked. The shadows under her eyes were fainter now, her shoulders straighter. "I'm proud of you," I told her. She gave a small, surprised smile, the kind that reaches the eyes. "Thank you, Ahmed." She left quietly. I sat on the edge of the bed with the tea cooling in my hands and felt something loosen inside my chest. A knot I hadn't realized was still there. The children watched us both carefully at first, like they were waiting for the next crack. But as the months went on, they relaxed. Aisha started bringing friends home again. Omar began talking about opening his own small repair shop one day. They didn't ask us to get back together. They didn't need to. They just needed to see that love could change shape and still be love. Quieter, more careful, but still there. One Friday my parents came for dinner, the first time since everything happened. My mother walked in with her usual steel pot of biryani. My father carried the newspaper under his arm, same as always. They didn't mention the separation. They didn't ask why we sat at opposite ends of the table. They just ate, talked about the weather, asked Aisha about her studies, told Omar he looked stronger. After dinner, When the children cleared the plates, my father stayed behind in the courtyard with me. We sat on the charpai under the neem tree. The night was cool. A single bulb glowed yellow above us. "You're doing well, Beta," he said quietly. I looked at him, the lines deeper around his eyes, the same steady gaze he'd had since I was small. "I'm trying, Abba." He nodded. "That's enough. Trying is enough." He placed his hand on my knee, brief, firm. Then he stood and went inside to help my mother with the dishes. I stayed out there a while longer, listening to the crickets and the distant call of a night watchman. And I realized something simple. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for forgiveness. Not for things to go back. Not for her to become someone else. I was just living. Saba and I never remarried each other. We never divorced either. We stayed in that gentle in-between space. Two people who had shared a life, broken it, and then learned how to share a different kind of life. Respectful, kind, separate but not strangers. Some nights I still smell jasmine and remember. Some mornings I wake and reach for the empty side of the bed. But the ache is smaller now, like an old song you know by heart but don't need to sing anymore. And that, I think, is healing. Not forgetting the hurt, but learning to live beside it without letting it define the days that come after.
And so, my dear ones, that long night at 2 in the morning, when the phone kept ringing and the words, "This ends tonight," slipped out of my mouth like a quiet prayer, became the beginning of something I never expected. Not a dramatic end, not a broken home filled with shouting and shattered plates, just an honest beginning. One built on separate rooms, separate accounts, separate silences that eventually softened into something kinder. The house still smells the same at dusk. Cumin in the kitchen, jasmine by the courtyard wall, the faint metallic scent of solder when Omar comes home from the shop. Aisha still leaves her biology books open on the dining table. Saba still embroiders in the evenings, her needle moving in the same careful rhythm she's always had. And I still sit on the back steps sometimes, watching the sky turn rose and gold, feeling the cool air settle over my shoulders like a shawl someone forgot to take away. We never went back to being husband and wife the way we once were, but we became something else. Two people who had walked through fire together, emerged scarred, and chose to keep walking side by side anyway. Not holding hands, not sharing a bed, just sharing a life that had room for truth. The children grew taller, stronger, more certain. They learned, perhaps too young, that love isn't always forever in the same shape, but that family can be. They learned forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's remembering without letting the memory poison the present. And me, I learned the hardest lesson of all, that sometimes the bravest thing isn't fighting to keep what's broken. It's having the courage to let it change. If you've ever sat in the dark at 2 in the morning, listening to a phone ring and wondering whether to answer or whether to finally speak your own truth, know this: you are not alone. The night always ends, and what comes after, even if it looks nothing like what came before, can still be beautiful in its own quiet way. So tell me, my dear ones, have you ever had to say, "This ends tonight," to something or someone you once loved? And if you did the dawn that followed surprise you with its gentleness? Share your heart in the comments below. Your words matter more than you know. If this story touched something inside you, please like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so we can keep meeting here in this small space between midnight and morning. Until next time, take care of your truths and take care of yourselves.